here for about 2.5 weeks. So the last week of April into May, and then the next 2 weeks until commencement happens. And then that Sunday when it actually occurs, I'll be headed back. But yeah, it's nice. Otherwise, I just stay in my house 'cause I moved somewhere that I don't really know anyone anymore. So it's just me vibing with my dogs and my cats.
Get to know some of those haunted tour.
Oh my gosh, yeah. So back in the day, I even used to work in Gettysburg at a bed and breakfast and an ice cream shop. And yeah, I got to, every once in a while, we all, after work, were like, let's go check this out. And we just go to a different one. It's fun. If you've never been to Gettysburg, it's a cool place. Especially if you like history.
When do you think that, so Chris, when do you think that Hospital Hill walking tour would be, not finalized, but maybe close to final?
It depends on how fast I can create all the entries. But having done this presentation is gonna help me quite a bit, because now I've got a bunch of history and photos in the can that makes it easier to create the entries for each app.
Yeah, but just shoot us an email when it's ready.
Yeah. I bet you guys get folks a lot of times like, where was Research Hospital? Where
We're
was
just
this?
thinking like even part of our new student orientation,
Yeah.
even just right around, just the block around here.
Yeah.
Just to show.
Recording in progress.
You still have like 5 minutes.
Yeah, so I'll be working on that next semester with Dr. Trowbridge. So, but if you're interested, you can look at the website is called theclio.com, and then the app is just called clio.com. And there's a Volker campus history tour you can check a look at. Take the whole thing sitting right here on your phone. So.
It'd be cooler to do it walking.
When it's warmer.
Yes. I have like narrow windows for my walking tours, like late March to early June, and then late September to early November.
You don't want to take walking tours when it's like 120 real feel
Well,
outside?
the professors be like, will you take my class on the walking tour? And like, well, yeah, sure. Let's, late March. No, we can't do it late March. I want to do it at the beginning of the semester. Well, I'm not doing it January 25th. I'm sorry. That's crazy. No one has any fun when it's 4 degrees out. And then in the summer, they're always like, well, we got this student group coming in. Can you do it in August? I'm like, no one wants to be sweaty on the walking tour, especially me.
Yeah, what about your feelings, Chris?
Yeah.
Cleo with a C, right?
Yeah, CLIO.
CLIO.
Yeah.
With an E as money. Wait, crypto.
Go ahead and tip your tour.
There's your guide to history.
But I'll have like Diastole and Ronald McDonald House and all that stuff will be on there too.
Ron? Should we start now or in 2 minutes?
Up to you.
Wait 2 minutes. Okay. Okay.
Someone's
Welcome.
not on mute.
Okay, I don't think it's started yet, so I'm gonna run over to the kitchen and from Zoom. Okay. The sink. You're welcome to sit in Sam's chair if you wanna, or you're just gonna listen while you work.
Yeah.
Wait, I can watch it too? Okay.
Mute all.
I'm sure they appreciate that.
1 more minute.
Welcome. Oh, hey.
Good, how are you?
This is David Trowbridge, who I was just telling you about.
No way.
He
was saying
I was talking about
nasty
Cleo. Okay.
Very pretty looking.
Thank
For
you.
the app, yeah.
Yeah. I can't take credit for pretty.
Functional.
So Volker's done, they're doing this one.
Functional is the goal.
Spring, so you can take a walk.
Good evening, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. This is the Dean's Lecture Series, which means there are talks that I think about or hear about, and I'm not quite sure where they would go, but I think they're of high value to the listeners. And so Christopher Wolff is our speaker this evening. Christopher has been the manager of our bookstore for 18 years.
Wow.
Is that correct?
18 years.
So he is by nature of having been here that long, part of our history. He also happens to be our campus historian, and he guides historic walking tours of the Volcker campus, and he has written a book, Pearl of Great Value, The History of UMKC Kansas City's University. And so Christopher is an authority. He was a lecturer in Greek and Latin, having graduated from Cal State Long Beach with comparative literature and anthropology credentials. He then attended the University of Kansas, graduating with a master's degree in classics. And he graduated from UMKC with a master's degree in higher education administration. It is a distinct pleasure to have Christopher here. As part of the Dean's orientation, I had the pleasure of hearing him give a talk to two of us, and it absolutely knocked me out. So this is going to be a distinct pleasure. Christopher, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, welcome everybody who's on Zoom. We're going to talk tonight a little bit about the history of Hospital Hill. And without much further ado, we'll get started with the prehistory of Hospital Hill. If I can get my forwarder to work.
I might be on Zoom itself instead of the presentation.
Bear with us, technical difficulties. Oh, there we go. So before there ever was a Hospital Hill or Missouri or the United States, the earliest culture that our archaeologists have defined as a unique identifiable culture is the Hopewell culture in this area. They were famous as mound builders, and all over the Midwest, especially in Ohio, you find the remnants of their villages and ceremonial mounds that they left. And there's a giant one north of St. Louis on the Illinois side called Cahokia Mound, which is actually a pyramid that these ancient people built. Now, if you ever are in that area, I highly recommend that you visit it. In this area, there was the Kansas City Hopewell, a subgroup of the Hopewell culture. And there are a variety of sites here in Kansas City that are identifiable as the Hopewell. Over in Riverside, there's a village called the Renner Village site that has been identified. And then in Kansas City's northeast, there is one of their ceremonial mounds, which is the center of a city park called Indian Mound City Park. Now, this map here is from the 1700s. It's from a French missionary. And on this map, we have the names of the various Native American tribes that we're familiar with. And I put over there in the west, that red star is where Kansas City is today. And you can see all the various tribes, most of which I'm assuming are going to be familiar to you from history or personal experience. Over in the west, in that green area over there, you see tribes such as the Kansa and the Osages and the Quapaw and the Yanktons, and a bunch of others. These tribes spoke languages in the Siouan family, which is related to the Dakota Indians in the northern Great Plains. And archaeologists have discovered that these people originally came from the area of the Great Lakes. But in the 1600s, they were pushed westward by a powerful confederacy of Indian tribes known as the Iroquois. And they arrived in the Great Plains sometimes in the 1600s. And because of being able to now use horses, they were able to rapidly settle the Great Plains at that time. So those were the original historic tribes that were in the area of Kansas City. Now, here's a map that shows the early development of the United States. So you can see in the east there, that brown shaded area is the land that the United States was awarded after the Revolutionary War from Great Britain, pretty much from the East Coast all the way to the Mississippi River. And after the Revolutionary War, the United States quickly started to develop new states, starting with Kentucky and Tennessee, et cetera. And as people migrated into these areas, they came into conflict with the native people, and it would erupt many times into outright war. Now, in 1803, we got the Louisiana Purchase from France and nearly doubled the size of the United States. And quickly, settlers started to move into the Louisiana Purchase in order to settle and create new states. Now, the first settlement by the United States in what is today Missouri was Fort Osage in 1808. So the Osage tribe was in this area, and they had suffered greatly due to disease and warfare, not just with the American settlers, but with other Native American tribes. And they asked the new American government to build them a trading post and a fort to protect them from the Indian tribes who lived in the West. And so Fort Osage was created in 1808. And on that little map there above, you can see where Fort Osage is. Today it's an historic site in northeast Jackson County. And that fort you see there is a recreation of what it probably looked like, or close to what it probably looked like back in the day. And you can see that dotted line going there below the Missouri River. That was the original Santa Fe Trail. So the trail originally started in Arrow Rock and Franklin, Missouri, and went across just south of the Missouri River to what is today Independence, and then down to Santa Fe. In 1830, the government passed the Indian Removal Act, and this act removed a large portion of the Native American tribes from the eastern United States over to the other side of the Missouri border into what is today Nebraska and Kansas and Oklahoma. And they were put on reservations in this new land. Now, most of these tribes spoke the Algonquin language, which was a very different language from the Siouan language of the Osage and the Kansa and the original Indians here. And so they were put on reservations here in Kansas. Here's a closer inset of what the Indian reservations looked like in the Kansas City area. So in what is today part of Wyandotte County, Johnson County, Douglas County was the Shawnee Reservation. And to the north of the Kansas River were the Delaware, and then later on the Wyandottes came and purchased a portion of their reservation for themselves in the very eastern portion of what is today Wyandotte County, which is named after them. Now, on these reservations, there were various religious missions from different Christian denominations. And in this area, we had three important missions. We had the Friends Mission, which were the Quakers, the Baptist Mission, and the Methodist Mission. And these missions were built just over the border from Missouri. And they became very important in history because it was one last place that wagon trains on the way to Santa Fe could stop and get supplies or repairs or rest before heading out into the wilderness. The Shawnee Baptist Mission was founded 1831, and it was about 49th and Knoll in what is today Roland Park, Kansas, is where this was located. It was founded by Isaac McCoy and his son-in-law, Johnston Likens. They weren't allowed to settle on the reservation itself, so they bought land on the Missouri side. Isaac McCoy's land is where St. Luke's Hospital is today, and Johnston Likens' land is where Westport is today. The Quaker mission started in 1837. The Quakers had a long relationship with the Shawnee tribe, and they were invited to come and set up a mission in a school in 1837. The most famous of them was the Methodist mission, started by Reverend Thomas Johnson, originally 1830 in the Kansas community of Turner, and then it moved to its current location in Fairway, Kansas in 1839. And these buildings still survive as a state historic site in Fairway. And I highly recommend, if you ever have a chance to visit here, because it's a unique and very important part of our history, the relationship of these various missions with the native tribes here, and to Kansas City history in general. So John Calvin McCoy was the son of Isaac McCoy, the founder of the Baptist Mission. And he bought his brother-in-law's farm and platted out a town that he called Westport in 1833. And this was meant to be a trading post for the Indian reservations. However, the Santa Fe Trail traffic, the wagon trains headed to Santa Fe, discovered that this was a great stopping point, and they began to divert their route to go through Westport because it was one last place where you could get supplies and aid if you needed it. And so Independence had been the main jumping off point for several years, and wagon trains headed to Santa Fe directly from Independence. Well, now they started to divert to Westport. And you can see the red line linking Westport and Independence. That was a wagon road that took 3 days to cross. But the wagon trains did it nonetheless. And then John McCoy decided, well, I wonder if I could create a boat landing near Westport. And so he forged a trail north to the river, and there was a natural ledge of rock that was perfect for a dock for riverboats. And that ledge of rock became known as Westport Landing. And a small town grew up next to the Westport Landing. And you can see in this artist's depiction on the left here of what that small town looked like, you can see behind the town there are these very tall bluffs. Those bluffs were made from chalk, a wind-borne silt that had settled in this area after the Ice Age. And in some places it was 30, 40, 50 feet thick. And so the original town of Westport Landing hugged the river right on the edge of those bluffs. Here's a couple more artist depictions of what that little town of Westport Landing looked like. And you can see it's hugging the riverbank there where the giant bluffs were behind. And then the bottom depiction is Thomas Hart Benton's painting of Westport Landing. And it shows the mix of all the different cultures that could be found at Westport Landing. 1850, the town of Kansas was formed by John McCoy and his brother-in-law, Johnston Likens, along with some other entrepreneurs here in Kansas City. And by 1853, the population had grown so much that it could be classified as a city by Missouri law. So in 1853, it became the city of Kansas, later on, of course, called Kansas City. In 1854, everything would change. At this point, this new town of Kansas was prospering on the trade of between the Indian nations and the Americans, and also the various trails to the west, Santa Fe, Oregon, California. But in 1854, the Kansas-Nebraska Act was passed. Now, this opened up the state of Kansas, or what is today the state of Kansas, to settlement. And the government began forcing the Indians to sign new treaties that would make them sell their land and then move to Oklahoma and open up what is today Kansas up to settlement. It also got rid of the Missouri Compromise, which had earlier in 1820 made the law that slavery could not exist above the southern boundary of Missouri. Well, now the issue of slavery was going to be decided by popular sovereignty. The people living in a territory were going to vote on whether slavery was allowed or not. And so in the Kansas territory, floods of people started to come in. People from Missouri who wanted to establish slavery in Kansas, and people from the Northeast who immigrated to Kansas to set up abolitionist communities to vote for Kansas to be a free state. And the result was political violence that, you know, in a lot of ways just can't even be imagined by us today. It's, you know, almost medieval at times in its brutality. The most famous of these abolitionist warriors was, of course, John Brown, who was known to go over to Missouri and kill slaveholders and bring their slaves to freedom via the Underground Railroad. Now, a lot of people will tell you that the Civil War started here in the Kansas City area, and I'm a firm believer in that this violence between the pro-slavery and the anti-slavery forces was really a precursor to the Civil War. And during the Civil War itself, some of the most violent brutality of the entire war happened in this area. So if you ever wondered why does Kansas and Missouri, why do they hate each other so much? It goes all the way back to this sentiment from the Civil War. Now today we don't know why we hate each other, we just do. You know, especially, you know, Mizzou and KU sports teams, they hate each other, but they have no idea why. But it all goes back to the antagonism between Kansas and Missouri during this so-called Bleeding Kansas period that led up to the Civil War. In the Civil War, there was a Union garrison here. It was called Fort Union, and it was located right about where Bartle Hall is today, up on top of those bluffs, looking down at the city of Kansas City. A couple of the more famous incidents that happened on the border here during the Civil War. The Jayhawkers were a Kansas militia affiliated with the Union Army, and in 1861, they famously burned the city of Osceola, Missouri. And then 1863, the most famous of them all was William Quantrell and his band of bushwhackers who burned the city of Lawrence in 1863. Now, they had burned other Kansas cities before, including Shawnee and Olathe and Stanley. But in Lawrence, they sacked the town, they burned it, and they killed up to 150 men in front of their wives in the street. So it was one of the most barbaric acts of the whole Civil War. And it's one that, you know, people in Kansas are still bitter about. And then, of course, in this area, we had the Battle of Westport, part of which was fought in what is today Lewis Park. And it was the largest cavalry engagement in the whole Civil War. And it's often referred to as the Gettysburg of the West. Now, after the Civil War, Kansas City was the first place where a railroad bridge crossed the Missouri River. And if Kansas City was a river town, it became a railroad city. Kansas City became a boom town as the western node of the nation's railroad lines. So you can see here on the map where Kansas City is, there in the middle there. And all roads in the country lead to Kansas City. And so Kansas City became a center for, of course, livestock and agriculture products, but also manufacturing and banking and insurance and every kind of industry you can imagine. Kansas City became a boom town after the Civil War. Here's a picture of what Kansas City looked like in 1871. And you can see the city hugging the bluffs there, and you can see those giant bluffs behind the city made of chalk. Now, it was very soft and easy to remove. And so as they built roads to the south, they just carved right through the chalk and made canyons. And then they sometimes would build up on top of the bluffs. But as time went on and the city grew, they began to remove the bluffs and scrape it all down to bedrock and build the modern city of Kansas City. And you might wonder, well, where did all that dirt go? I've heard different things. I've heard that it was carted off and spread onto farm fields. But I suspect that most of it was probably dumped in the river. And here's a great photo here. You can see as they built the city, they went block by block and removed those bluffs as they needed them. And you can see how tall they are, you know, in some places 30, 40, 50 feet tall. Here's a map of Kansas City, 1887. And you can see the arrows there. And that shows you the remnant of that original wagon road from Kansas City over to Independence. Here's a close-up of Westport, which is getting swallowed by its daughter city, Kansas City. And notice how Kansas City is laid out on a northwest or north-south, east-west grid pattern, whereas Westport was aligned onto the Santa Fe Trail. So if you're ever in Westport and you're like, oh my God, who designed the roads here? Well, that's why it's so crazy, because originally it was lined up pointing at Santa Fe and Independence. And then here's a modern map, and you can see in Hyde Park is the last little remnant of that wagon road in between Kansas City and Independence. Here's that map again, 1887, and you can see the arrows there are pointing to what is a railroad line that runs across Kansas City. Now, at that point, there is a broad plateau that runs all the way across that southern part of the city. And that railroad line was at the base of that plateau. There was also a creek there called OK Creek, which was for many decades an open sewer. It ran along the base of the creek, base of the bluffs where the railroad line ran. Union Station, of course, sits today at the base of those bluffs. And when the city designers were cutting roads south, they cut them right through that bluff. But these bluffs were made of stone, and so they weren't easy to remove. And so they cut canyons into the bluffs of stone. You can see on the left there, you can see Union Station. Gives you an idea how tall the plateau is. In the middle is what was known as Signboard Hill. And here's another view of that canyon in between where the Liberty Memorial is and Signboard Hill is. You can see an island has been cut into the bluff. And so the roads heading south cut these little islands into the plateau. And these little islands in the plateau are the famous hills of Kansas City. So we have Memorial Hill, where the Liberty Memorial is going to be built. Then there's Signboard Hill, which we just looked at. And then, of course, we have Hospital Hill, which is where we're at right now. And here's a map here showing the hills of Kansas City here. The first medical school in Kansas City was the Kansas City College of Physicians and Surgeons. After 1890, it was known as the Kansas City Medical College. And it was started by Dr. A.B. Taylor, 1869. He had been a physician in the Union Army, decided to come to the boomtown of Kansas City, and he lobbied the city government to take out a bond issue to build Kansas City's first hospital, which we'll talk about here in just a little bit. This college lasted all the way till 1905, when it became part of the University of Kansas Medical School. The Kansas City Dental College was founded in 1881, and it was a department of the Kansas City Medical College. And then in 1888, it was spun off into its own independent private dental college at 10th and Troost. And then the Kansas City College of Pharmacy was founded also as a department of the Kansas City Medical College in 1885, and it became independent in 1888. And it eventually was moved to 1721 Baltimore, where Minnie and David Whitney were the longtime owners and operators. The University Medical College started in 1881, and they partnered with the Episcopal Church in 1885 to build a hospital next door to the college called All Saints Hospital at 10th and Campbell. All Saints Hospital was the original hospital that became St. Luke's Hospital today. The Western Dental College was founded in 1890, and this was a private college of dentistry. Dr. D.J. McMillan was the founder and first dean at 12 West 10th Street. It was right down the street from the other dental college, and the two were huge rivals. And then in 1895, the Women's Medical College was founded. there was not a lot of opportunity to train female physicians in Kansas City because the other medical schools would not accept them. And Dr. Flavel Tiffany, who had been part of the University Medical College, started up the Women's Medical College, especially to train female physicians. It was pretty short-lived. Several dozen students did graduate. Dr. Tiffany is most famous because he bought up land north of Kansas City, and he was going to start a health resort up there. The health resort never materialized, but the name of the health resort, Tiffany Springs, survives to this day as a place name. And there were other medical colleges as well, homeopathic medical colleges, osteopathic medical colleges that came and went over the years. This is the UMKC School of Medicine is actually not the first School of Medicine on Hospital Hill. The first was the Kansas City College of Medicine and Surgery, which was at 22nd and Charlotte, and it was founded in 1916. Students who did attend medical school there would discover that only one state in the country would license them. But it wasn't really necessary to even attend classes because for a few $100s, they would sell you a medical diploma. And in 1925, it became a national scandal when this was revealed that they had sold thousands of medical diplomas across the country. And then in 1916, the Kansas City College of Osteopathy and Surgery was founded. It's today, of course, Kansas City University, which is Kansas City's longest standing medical school. Originally started at 7th and Wyandotte. In 1919, the Kansas City Dental College and the Western Dental College merge, and they became the Kansas City Western Dental College, and they moved to their location at 10th and Troost. Dr. Roy Reinhardt becomes the owner and the dean of the Kansas City Western Dental College. And here's some photos from the dental college's yearbook, which was called the Bushwhacker. So their mascot was the Bushwhacker, the Confederate sympathizing militia from the Civil War. And each year they would have a formal dance called the Bushwhacker Ball, and they had sports teams that would compete against other universities as the Bushwhackers. The first hospital in Kansas City was Kansas City Hospital, which was built in 1870. It was a wooden structure, and it burned down in 1874. And so the city built these brick structures to replace it. And as time would go on, they would take out more bond issues, they would build more facilities onto it, and this became Kansas City's main hospital at 22nd and McCoy, which is 22nd and Kenwood today. Here's another view on the left there of what it looked like from the backside, and then you can see one of the early ambulances for the hospital. The emergency room, however, for Kansas City was in the basement of Kansas City City Hall downtown, and so it wasn't in this facility. I'm going to stop here to talk about a man who's really important to our story, William Volker, who came to Kansas City about this same time we've been talking about, in 1882. He had come to the United States as a German immigrant, as a young child, and he attended school in Chicago. And when he graduated, he became a bookkeeper for a company that made picture frames. And the owner of the company died, so he bought the company, and he moved it to Kansas City so that it would be closer to his lumber suppliers. And from those humble beginnings, he grew the company into a complete wholesaler of fine home furnishings, the William Volker and Company. And he dominated the market in fine home furnishings in the western United States because of Kansas City's unique position as that western railroad node. And he quickly became one of Kansas City's wealthiest men. Here we see this location was at 7th and Delaware, which is original location, and later he moved to this facility by the city market, which exists to this day. So if you ever go out of the city market, you can still see the William and Volker Company factory and warehouses, which are lofts today. Here's an example of one of his catalogs, and some of the products you could purchase out of his catalogs, fine home furnishings. Now, early on in his career, Mr. Volker decided that he was going to set aside $1 million of his fortune to take care of himself and his family, and the rest of his money he was going to give away to the people of Kansas City. He's most famous for his anonymous acts of giving to individuals, for which he earned the nickname Mr. Anonymous. But you could go to Mr. Volcker and you'd say, Mr. Volcker, I need money for food. And he'd say, how much do you need? And he'd write you a check. Mr. Volcker, I need to buy eyeglasses. Mr. Volcker, will you help me start a business? Mr. Volcker, I can't pay the rent. And he would write you a check. At that building we just saw down by the city market, people would line up down the road every day to get a chance to see him and ask for help. And he gave away millions of dollars to individuals that way. And people would always ask him, why are you giving away all this money? And he would say, because God is giving it to me faster than I can give it away. Now, he of course gave money to the great civic projects of the day in Kansas City, and especially hospitals. So German Hospital was the second hospital on Kansas City's Hospital Hill, and it was founded in 1886 by Kansas City's German community, primarily to cater to the German community, but as time went on, it catered to all of Kansas City, at 23rd and Holmes. So this was the original facility called German Hospital. However, during the First World War, the name German Hospital wasn't a very popular name, I should say. And so they changed the name to Research Hospital. And you can see here by 1918, when they changed the name, the hospital has grown quite a bit. And these other buildings that you see here were mostly funded by Mr. Volcker, including the diagnostic clinic, which you see there in the center. And then he also built the Research Hospital Nursing School in 1926. 1897, Dr. Alice Graham and Dr. Catherine Barry Richardson started up the Free Bed Fund Association for Crippled, Deformed, and Ruptured Children at a house in 15th and Cleveland. This had been originally a small maternity hospital. They had come to Kansas City to set up practice as physicians. Dr. Alice Graham was a dentist, and Catherine Richardson was a physician and surgeon. And they saw a huge need in Kansas City to take care of those children that nobody wanted to take care of. This was a time when diseases like cholera and typhoid were rampant, and they would create hundreds and hundreds of orphans here in Kansas City that had to be put in orphanages. And there was those children who were, deformed or had disabilities or were severely abused that nobody wanted. And so they formed this association to take those children in. And of course, in time, this grew into a hospital to care for children. And over the next couple of decades, they worked to raise the money to create Mercy Hospital at 1710 Independence Avenue. And this hospital would take care of children for no cost, and was there to support the most vulnerable, neediest children in Kansas City. Mr. Volcker was one of the main contributors who helped build this hospital. In 1906, Thomas Swope, famous Kansas City philanthropist who donated Swope Park to the city, donated 6 acres of land on Hospital Hill for the creation of a new public city hospital. And so in 1908, General Hospital was built and at 2315 Locust. And you can see this is the original building here, but as we'll see, it was added on to countless times. And the original city hospital, which was just to the north, was then at that point set aside for Kansas City's African-American population. It had been a desegregated hospital, but now Kansas City segregated into 2 separate hospitals. 1910, William Volcker built the first wing on the new General Hospital, which was the tuberculosis ward. Eventually, the county would build a tuberculosis hospital over in the East Bottoms. And here's another picture of General Hospital where you can see over the years the city began adding on as they had more funds and they had more need for more beds or more research facilities. And here's another look of the city of rabbit warren of buildings that became General Hospital. So where does Hospital Hill fit in with the overall planning of Kansas City? So Kansas City had a famous movement called the City Beautiful movement at the turn of the 20th century, where they decided to build parks and parkways all throughout the city. And they envisioned green corridors that would go the entire length of the city. So you can see over on the left there, you have Penn Valley Park, where Liberty Memorial would be built. And then you have Roanoke Park. And then in the middle there, right next to it where the star is, that is where Hospital Hill is. And it was considered to be part of this parkway, this green corridor that would go all the way north to south through Kansas City. The one right in the center there, of course, is the Paseo. So we'll look at some pictures of Hospital Hill, and you'll see these open green spaces. And those where those green spaces came from. They're there from the very beginning. St. Mary's Hospital was built in 1909 by the Sisters of St. Mary at 28th and Main. Not really on Hospital Hill, but kind of Hospital Hill adjacent. The Sisters of St. Mary had served at the research hospital as nurses and administrators before founding their own hospital. Wheatley Provident Hospital is also kind of a Hospital Hill adjacent hospital. It is just a couple of blocks north of Hospital Hill at 1826 Forest. It was founded by Dr. John Edward Perry and originally founded in his home. And then he built the wing on the left in 1912 as a private hospital to serve Kansas City's African American population. And in 1923, the wing on the right was built as the children's wing. And this is because Children's Mercy decided to segregate. They had always been desegregated, but they had so many people that were refusing to give them money to operate since they accepted African American children. And it got to the point where no amount of segregation within the hospital would satisfy these people. And so Mr. Volker and another philanthropist here in Kansas City named Frank Niles, they built that wing on Wheatley Provident Hospital for African American children. And then Children's Mercy started up a pediatrician program in that hospital to train black doctors in pediatrics. In 1930, the original city hospital was torn down, and General Hospital number 2 was built, and this was for Kansas City's African American population. And it was 22nd and Kenwood today. And the hospital was run completely by African Americans. Administrators, doctors, staff, patients were all African American. And here's another look of what that hospital looked like. And over on the left there is the heating and cooling plant. And that building still exists today, which I'll show you here in a little bit. And it was the heating and cooling plant actually for both General Hospital number 1 for the whites and General Hospital number 2 for the African Americans. In 1925, the Florence Home for Colored Girls moved, or was established, I should say, at 38th and Virginia, which was across the street from where the orphanage for African American children was in Kansas City at the time. But after General Hospital number 2 was created, they wanted to move closer to General Hospital number 2 so the pregnant mothers would be closer to the hospital. And so Mr. Volker paid to establish this facility for them at 2228 Campbell. And so here we have a map of what we can kind of call the golden age or the classic age of Hospital Hill. You can see in the bottom left here we have General Hospital number 1, and then on the top there you have General Hospital number 2. There's that plant that we were talking about, and you can see from the plant there's a tunnel that goes all the way to General Hospital number 1. It also connected with General Hospital number 2. So if the hospitals needed to, supplies or they needed help, they would have easy access to each other through that tunnel. And then this is that green space I was telling you about, and this is temporary housing that was built there during a housing shortage after the Second World War. And then we've got the research nursing building there that Mr. Volker built, and then research hospital itself right there next to General Hospital number 1. And then way over here in the east, we have the Florence home. And above the Florence home to the north, we have this here is a bread factory, the Schutze Bakery factory. And then this was an African-American grade school, Sumner Elementary School. And then here's a photo here showing all these different buildings I've been talking about, the heating and cooling plant, the hospitals, what they looked like back in the day. And then this is today's map with those original place names on it. And so you can see there's actually a few survivors of this classic age of Hospital Hill in today's world. You can see the heating and cooling plant are there. Over here, you've got the General Hospital nursing school, and then you have the research nursing school. Those 3 buildings still exist today. And so here's a view of Hospital Hill, of this classic age of Hospital Hill here. And you can see the green space there, which is part of the Kansas City Parks and Boulevard system that continues all the way down Gillum, all the way down, if you go south on Gillum and you kind of go down to that sunken area down to Gillum Park, that's all considered part of this same parkway. And there's another shot of General Hospital number 2. And you can see how it's just become a huge city unto itself. As every few years they had to build a new building and new offices and new wings and new labs, and the hospital just grew and grew and grew and became enormously expensive to operate. And this is what that view looks like today. So you can see the tower there on the left of the heating and cooling plant, and then you can see the modern buildings of Hospital Hill today, and then of course the green space. The next entry into our story is the University of Kansas City, which chartered in 1929. The University of Kansas City was the brainchild of William Volker and Ernest Newcomb. And they originally attempted to partner with the Methodist Church here in Kansas City and start a Methodist university, but quickly gave up on that idea when they had trouble winning support and raising money for it. And so Mr. Volker and Mr. Newcomb decided to partner with Kansas City's Chamber of Commerce and create the University of Kansas City. And you can see here on the right, the original board of trustees of the University of Kansas City. And that one there with the arrow is a man named Arthur Magg, who was a very important person in Kansas City history. He was a very talented lawyer who would spend the rest of his life on the board of the University of Kansas City, later UMKC. He was also a founder of Menorah Hospital and a founder of the Midwest Research Institute and even Starlight Theater. At the time of his death, he was on the board of 29 separate companies and organizations, and people from all over the world sought out his legal advice. And he was an expert in wills and trusts and foundations. He started the precedent where the person who manages a trust could make decisions on how to spend the trust money. So let's say someone left aside $1 million for a polio hospital. Well, once polio was all but cured, there's no need for that money. And so he established the precedent that the person who manages that trust could then decide how to invest it into charity. So he'll re-enter our story here in a little bit. Mr. Volker bought 40 acres of land from the estate of William Rockhill Nelson, who at the time, his trustees were trying to sell off his assets to build the Nelson Atkins Art Museum. And so Mr. Volker gave the trustees $100,000 for this 40 acres of land just south of Brush Creek, where Rockhill and Cherry split. And he told the trustees of the University of Kansas City that he wanted it to be an anonymous gift. He didn't want anyone to know it was him. And so the next day, this front page article that you see here appeared in the Kansas City Star. And so they felt they had no choice but to name it the Volcker campus, and it's been known as the Volcker campus ever since. In 1931, Mr. Volcker bought the mansion of Walter Dickey, which is today a Schofield Hall at UMKC, and he donated the mansion and the 10-acre property that it sits on today, which is the quad at UMKC's Volcker campus. He donated it to the university in 1931. And then the university had its campus, it had a first building, and began recruiting students in 1933. And these are the original articles in the newspaper announcing the opening of the University of Kansas City. And then on October 1st, 1933, the university had its first convocation. Now, if you're familiar with UMKC's Volcker campus and Schofield Hall, this is the back porch of Schofield Hall, which served as the university's stage. And so this is where convocation and graduation would be held every year. Here's the first students and faculty of the university on that first convocation. Mr. Volcker built the Science Building in 1935, which is today Mannheim Hall, the President's House in 1936, which is today called University House. He built the library in 1936. He built the Chemistry Biology Building in 1942. And before he died in 1948, he left the university $250,000 to build a law school, which was eventually completed in 1950. So what health science program do you think was the university's first health science program? Anyone want to guess? Dentists? Anybody else want to guess dentists? Yes, get dentists? It's actually nursing. 1939, as the Department of Nursing was founded. It was run in conjunction with a general hospital and research hospital. And so nursing students would take science courses, liberal arts courses at the Volcker campus, and then nursing courses down at the hospitals. The Kansas City Western Dental College merged with the University of Kansas City in 1942. It was the second professional school at the university. The School of Law had merged in 1938. The School of Dentistry was always on the lookout for more students, a source of students, which is why it wanted to merge with the university. And then their facility at 10th and Troost became the main facility for the School of Dentistry. In 1948, the university inherited 5 surplus Army buildings from Camp Crowder in Neosho, Missouri. They were barracks buildings. And so that one in the front left, that was the building for the first-year dental students. 1943, Kansas City College of Pharmacy merged with the University of Kansas City. They had been hit hard financially during the Depression, and then again with the loss of students because of the Second World War, so they needed affiliation with the university to survive. And so they became a school at the University of Kansas City in 1943. It became UKC School of Pharmacy. And they originally operated in that biology chemistry building, and then later on they had their own Army barracks that they operated at. And if any of you remember UMKC campus from years ago, that building stood until 2013. And so you'd walk by and you'd look down there and you'd be like, oh my God, that's an Army barracks. And indeed it was. And then Katz Hall was a gift of Isaac and Michael Katz, famous pharmacists here in Kansas City. It was built in 1965. So here are the UKC trustees in 1953. And we've got 2 important people for our story here. On the left there, that's Arthur Magg, who we talked about. Arthur Magg, like I had mentioned, was expert in wills and trusts and foundations. And one of his pet projects was the Kansas City Association of Trusts and Foundations, which was an organization which sought to combine various charitable trusts into one entity to serve the public good. And then 2 over here from him, by the other arrow, that is Joyce Hall, founder and owner of Hallmark Cards. He was a member of the Board of Trustees of the university. And at this time here, he's planning on building a headquarters for Hallmark right next to Hospital Hill. And he also has a far-reaching vision of totally transforming what was Signboard Hill into an area for shopping and offices that was going to be eventually called Crown Center. And so he's in the formulating stage of those plans. Now, Arthur Magg hires Homer Wadsworth, who was an expert in trusts and foundations, to be director of the Kansas City Association of Trusts and Foundations. And Homer Wadsworth's first project is creating the Greater Kansas City Mental Health Foundation, which was to recruit mental health professionals here in Kansas City. Nathan Stark was hired by Joyce Hall to be a vice president of Hallmark, and he becomes the chair of the corporation that's set up to create Crown Center, which is the Crown Center Redevelopment Corporation. So Joyce Hall also has this vision that if he creates this fantastic new shopping and office park, he doesn't want it to be next to Hospital Hill as it currently was, which was filled with rundown neighborhoods with hospitals sitting in the middle of it. And so he quietly began buying up properties on Hospital Hill with an eye for the future development of Hospital Hill itself. In 1958, Kansas City merges General Hospitals 1 and 2. They did this out of financial necessity, and both the staffs of both hospitals hated the idea. So General Hospital 1 did not want to work with the staff at General Hospital 2, and General Hospital 2 was so proud of Kansas City's African-American hospital. They ran it top to bottom. Plus, they felt that if they closed General Hospital 2, they would all be out of a job. So the city had to assure everybody that nobody would lose their job because of the merger, and that General Hospital number 1 would have improvements, and they would increase the plant size, and they desegregated the hospital. And all of the fear and anger dissipated once the hospital was desegregated, and the staffs of both hospitals got used to working with each other and discovered they all had a common goal. On the heels of that merger became the first master plan for the Hospital Hill area. The cornerstone of this master plan was the creation of a corporation to run the hospital, and that was the General Hospital and Medical Center, Inc. Corporation. And it would take management of the hospital away from the city. And when Homer Wadsworth and Nathan Stark went to Mayor H. Roe Bartle of Kansas City to pitch this plan, he was like, let me get this straight. We won't have anything to do with the management of the hospital? And they're like, that's correct. He's like, where do we sign? Because the hospital was just such a huge burden on the city. And so this master plan, the cornerstone was the creation of this corporation to run the hospital, but it was also going to increase the size and scope of what General Hospital did. Research Hospital was underway, had a plan underway to move to 63rd and Prospect. And so plans were put into place to purchase Research Hospital's facilities for use by General Hospital. And then they wanted to affiliate with the MU Med School and set up a satellite program to train doctors at General Hospital here in Kansas City. And there was a plan even to move Children's Mercy to Hospital Hill so that Children's Mercy could take care of all of the indigent children in Kansas City and take the burden off of General Hospital. And then there was a move to move the UKC School of Dentistry along with its clinic to Hospital Hill as well. So in 1961, these plans are being formulated. Now they just need to raise the money to make it all happen. And so Nathan Stark and Homer Wadsworth recruit Dr. E. Gray Diamond, who is a cardiologist at the University of Kansas Hospital. And they sell him on the idea, and he begins to help them lobby city, state, county, federal governments to raise the money to make this plan happen. Well, after a couple of years, Dr. Diamond takes a job in La Jolla, California, and moves on. But Stark and Wadsworth keep up the fight. And part of their master plan is going to be the removal of all the rundown houses and buildings and old factories and apartment buildings that are all over Hospital Hill. And so Kansas City has that area declared blighted for purposes of urban renewal. And so you can see here where the Hospital Hill area is, and all those areas in orange are declared blighted, so that the city can use eminent domain laws to buy all those people out and own the land. And so here is a picture here, 1963, what Hospital Hill looked like. And so you can see research number one, General Hospital number 1, General Hospital number 2, and you can see interspersed all around the hospitals there, you can see were housing developments that went back, some of them, to before the 20th century.
Hallmark's bigger than the hospitals.
Yeah, Hallmark's huge. And so here is an aerial photo, and you can see the hospitals there sitting in the middle of these old rundown neighborhoods that the city wanted to move out of the way so they could have a vision for the future. And then look at General Hospital number 2 there. It has really become just this massive complex. 1963, Research Hospital moves to 63rd and Prospect. William Volker, before he died in 1948, had left Research Hospital an endowment of $2.5 million. And that became the kernel of the fund that allowed them to build the new hospital at 63rd Street. Also, in 1963, the University of Kansas City merges with the University of Missouri system. So the University of Kansas City becomes UMKC. The president of the university, Dr. Carlton Schofield, had been tasked with trying to save the University of Kansas City from bankruptcy. In the early 1960s, the university was faced with a position where they had to raise 40% of the school's operating funds from unrestricted gifts every year just to keep the lights on, and it wasn't sustainable. And so when the University of Missouri came to him and said, hey, we want to expand to Kansas City, why don't you affiliate with us? He went to the trustees of the university, and all of them voted unanimously no. They were very proud of their university. One of the trustee members, Arthur Magg, he had been with the trustees from the very beginning. They were very proud of their accomplishment, and there was a huge blow to some very big egos in order to allow their private university to become handed over to the state. So Schofield drew up a report showing how much money the university would have to raise in unrestricted gifts every year just to keep the lights on. And by 1970, the university would have to raise over $2 million a year in unrestricted gifts to operate in the way it was. And so he took this report to Arthur Magg and won Arthur Magg over, and Arthur Magg went to the other trustees and convinced them to affiliate and become part of the University of Missouri system. In 1968, James Olson, who was a historian from the University of Nebraska, he becomes chancellor of UMKC, and Homer Wadsworth and Nathan Stark come to him, and they tell him about what's happening on Hospital Hill, and they say, we're having trouble getting MU to get on board with establishing a medical school in Kansas City. What do you think about establishing a medical school at UMKC? And he loves the idea. So he goes to the curators in October of 1968, shortly after he arrives here, and asks them to approve a medical school at UMKC. And the curators of University of Missouri approve the idea and say, you have the green light to raise the money to start a medical school. Good luck with that. I think they were probably relieved that the whole idea of Mizzou having a satellite program in Kansas City was abandoned, because they probably got a lot of pushback on that. And so now we have the green light to start a medical school at UMKC. And so Wadsworth and Stark call up Dr. Diamond in California and say, hey, we're going to try to start our own medical school here at UMKC. Are you interested? And he says, you know what? I've always wanted to start a medical school, and I've got some ideas of how we can make a revolutionary medical school. So he gets on board, and Olson hires him as vice provost of health sciences. Children's Mercy moves to 24th and Locust in 1970, right next door to General Hospital. The School of Dentistry, UMKC School of Dentistry, opens in 1970. It moves from its location at 10th and Troost into a new building that it occupies today. The original building is today the City Union Mission. 1971, School of Medicine classes begin. Dr. Diamond hires Richardson Novak as the founding dean. Dr. Novak had been a consultant for the creation of the med school, and so he is kept on as the founding dean. And here we can see on the bottom right there, students going into the old research hospital building, which was the first home of the UMKC School of Medicine. And here's the university newspaper at UMKC announcing the inauguration of the med school. And then here we have what I guess we could call the Silver Age of Hospital Hill, where we have modern buildings being built interspersed amongst the older Hospital Hill buildings. So we've got the School of Med there to the left being built. School of Dentistry, you can see Children's Mercy buildings are there. And then, of course, you can see Research Hospital and General Hospital still there. The city was still using both general and research facilities for its city hospital. School of Medicine building, this building was completed in 1994. I'm very glad that the designers decided to go with a brick facade rather than concrete. If you look at like the School of Dentistry building, it screams 1970, where I think this building has aged a little better. Truman Medical Center, 1976. Once again, they went with the brick instead of the concrete, which I applaud. UMKC School of Nursing was founded in 1979, and its home was the old Research Hospital School of Nursing building. And then it was originally for graduates only, and then 2000, a bachelor's program was started. Diastole, which was Dr. Diamond's personal home, was gifted to the university in 1988 as a conference center. I love this building because it's not only has like the amazing kiva for presentations, but it also has so much of Dr. Diamond's personality. You can see the actual books that he read and the records that he listened to, and it's just amazing. And in that home, you have this little wooden sculpture there, which became the inspiration for the Take Wing sculpture in front of the School of Medicine building. When Dr. Diamond's children were young, the whole family took sculpture classes, and his daughter, Lark, actually went on to become a professional sculptor. In 1953, he found a piece of driftwood walking down the beach, and he carved it into that sculpture you see up there on the top left. His daughter, Lark, blew it up and made a bronze version of it, which is the Take Wing statue that we have in front of the school today. And it really became, that sculpture really became inspirational for Dr. Diamond's mission. Ronald McDonald House at 25th and Cherry, 1988. The Bernstein House was the first unit, and then they've added all these other units subsequently. 1990-92, General Hospital was demolished. It sat empty for many years because there were various preservation groups here in Kansas City that were fighting the city. They wanted to preserve it since it was a historic building, but it could not really be used for anything else. It needed to be torn down, unfortunately. And then here we have 1995, what Hospital Hill looks like. And so this is that silver age of Hospital Hill here. You can see the School of Medicine, and you can see Truman Hospital, and you can see Children's Mercy before they started adding on massive wings. Health Sciences Building was added in 2007 for our nursing and pharmacy schools at UMKC. The Founders Plaza was added at that time with the busts of the three founders, Dr. Diamond, Homer Wadsworth, and Nathan Stark. Of course, these men, rightly are honored for the contributions they made, but really there were hundreds and hundreds of people that worked tirelessly to make the UMKC School of Medicine a reality. 2013, UMKC built the Hospital Hill Apartments, our first housing facility for students down here on Hospital Hill. And then you can see here a modern map of modern Hospital Hill here. And those three arrows represent the remaining structures from Hospital Hill's classic golden age. We've got the heating and cooling plant from General Hospitals 1 and 2, and then we have the nursing schools from Research Hospital and General Hospital, which still survive. And those buildings are, over 100 years old now. And then lastly, we have the future of Hospital Hill, which I'm sure you guys are very familiar with. But There's going to be some cosmetic changes made on interchanges at the university. I love how the master plan has like this facade built onto the front of the School of Medicine. So there's a future plan just to tack some other building onto the front. And then, of course, there is the Health Sciences building, which is they're digging the foundation for as we speak. And this is an artist's representation of what that building is going to look like, and eventually how it could be the catalyst for a whole new health science district here on Hospital Hill with a bunch of shiny buildings of steel and glass. And here you can see our master plan, which shows the construction site for that new building. And then it's got that facade on the School of Medicine and then the facade on the School of Dentistry. Somehow we need to desperately add space, and so that's just kind of a placeholder for whatever it is we're going to do. My guess is the health science building is going to be built. It's going to be shiny and new with lots of windows, and this building built of brick is going to look very tired and antiquated, and we'll want to build a whole new School of Medicine. And here you can see a close-up of the long-term plans here for the university for our portion of Hospital Hill. And if you look over on the left there, you can see Children's Mercy, and you can see University Health to the north there. And they're looking very much like General Hospital number 1 looked there at the end, whereas this huge rabbit warren of buildings and add-ons that eventually became unsustainable. So who knows, there might be a new future in the offing for those hospitals as well. So, 150 years. Anybody have any questions? Let me see if I can.
That's wonderful.
See if I can turn on the audience questions here.
Doesn't look like they have it in chat, but they can unmute themselves and ask
They
if
can?
they have anything.
Okay, yeah, if anybody listening online has got questions, please feel free to go to chat. Anybody here have any questions? If I don't know the answer, I'll come up with something convincing.
Do we still have any of the salt marsh places anywhere? Do we still have, like, how, I know it's clearly not tall anymore, but is there still like little areas?
There are, in Westport actually, you
Really?
can see some, where if you go down Broadway, I'm trying to think what's there, but there's an area of Broadway and Westport Road where there are big bluffs with houses on the top.
Oh my gosh.
And then there's like these stairways that go directly up from the street, like 30 feet straight up to get into the house. There's a few houses like that there still.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Did the original trolley system in Kansas City get to Hospital Hill?
It did. And in fact, Holmes Road is named for a guy named Holmes who owned the first trolley line here in Kansas City. Kansas City had the most comprehensive streetcar system in the country at one point, but it was very expensive to maintain and run, and it was going to bankrupt the city. So they switched over to buses, and the trolley stopped running in 1956. And then we decided, well, we missed that. And so decades and decades later, we decided to try to build it again, and it's way more expensive now.
We do have a question. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Hold on here. Let me get my glasses on. Secret.
It's more of a comment than a question, but it's
Gotcha.
always a comment.
Well, I appreciate the comment. Thank you. Any
Hey,
questions?
Chris, I got one for you.
Yes, please.
We lost you.
We lost you.
Hey, you able to hear me?
I can hear you. Yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining. I found it to be very informative. Really appreciate you spending the time with our community this evening. I think a lot of the things that I really appreciated was I do a lot of tours for the School of Medicine, and a lot of the names and the different stories that you've told over today are things that I've seen in our building and on both campuses. So I just appreciate the connections that you've built. Just a quick question for you. If you had like a blank checkbook at this point and you were able to just do whatever you wanted in terms of the physical structure and the facilities, what are some things that maybe you would add to our shared health sciences district and campus that you see would add to this whole story that you've told?
Well, I think, the School of Medicine, I think, should really be a top priority because, Missouri has such a need for doctors. And we have counties here in Missouri that don't have a doctor in the single county, the whole county. And I think, we need the capacity to train more doctors here for Missouri. And, maybe start a program where the county sponsors a student to go through medical school with the proviso that they would then work in the county for 4 years or 6 years to pay it back, or however much it would be. Programs like that I think would be a huge priority for Missouri. And School of Dentistry, I know, they need expanded space for their clinic, and they're getting a clinic in the new health science building, but whether or not it's going to be big enough, I don't know. So I think it really should be a priority, for expanding the number of students that we're able to train to be health professionals, not just for medicine and dentistry, but, nursing, pharmacy as well, because there's a huge need, not just in Missouri and Kansas City, but across the country. And I would love to be able to be Mr. Volker and write a check to make that happen. You had a question here?
Yeah, Stan.
Awesome. Thank you so much again.
You're welcome.
Stan Augustine surgery. Very interesting. Some of this I knew, some of it was new to me, so I was very grateful for this. My question, and not to focus on the negative, but just curious, the community that was deemed blighted, do we know anything about people that were displaced? And because I've been around here and I've seen what's been going on up and down Truce, and it's totally different than it was when I started school here in the late 80s. So do we know anything about those communities?
I've kind of looked at census records. I haven't been able to pinpoint the Hospital Hill neighborhoods in the census records yet, but I suspect they're African-American communities because the grade school here in Hospital Hill was an African-American grade school. And so I suspect that it was African-American community, yes. Yeah. Kansas City was, as segregated as any city in the South at one point. Housing, medicine, lunch counters, everything but voting. African Americans were encouraged to vote in Kansas City as long as they voted for the machine. But we have a very long and deep history of segregation in this city that we're still trying to repair and remedy to this day. But to answer your question, I suspect it was an African American community. There was huge areas of African American communities in Kansas City during this same time frame where the housing was torn down to create Highway 71, areas like that. And even in my own memory here in Kansas City, over on the other side of Troost, about 2000, year 2000, there were, many acres of land that were cleared of old houses. And if you could see just over on the other side of the Hospital Hill housing complex, there's still just empty neighborhoods over there that haven't rebuilt yet. So that answers your question?
That was great.
Okay.
You've got a hand raised, Mark.
Yes, hi. Yeah,
Yes.
This is Mark. Thank you very much for this talk. It was really fantastic, and I have to say, I really appreciate this. Being a person that didn't grow up in the Kansas City area, it's really fantastic to get an overview like this. Can you recommend a good source, a book, probably not a website, but a book or something else that, or several books that cover a lot of the history of Kansas City that you would recommend?
I would recommend a book that was published by the Kansas City Star about 25 years ago called Kansas City, An American Story. I believe the author's name was Montgomery. It's a great overview of the whole history of Kansas City with lots of photographs and using the Kansas City Star archive extensively. That's a great introduction to Kansas City history. There are a couple of books about Hospital Hill. Both of them are out of print. One of them is just called Hospital Hill. It was published in 1995. And then there was the book that the School of Medicine published to celebrate the school's 50th anniversary. That's called Hospital Hill, A Proven Experiment. You should be able to find both of those at the UMKC library. But those are great books to dive deeper into the history of Hospital Hill, which of course is part of Kansas City history overall.
Oh, great, thank you. And I take it that you are easy to find over in the bookstore across the street?
Yeah, oh no, I'm actually down on the Volker campus.
Oh, you are? Oh, okay.
Yeah, so you are
well, I'll be-
welcome to visit me. I'm there all the time.
Okay.
Morning, noon, and
Well,
night.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was a wonderful talk. I
It's
really
my
enjoyed it.
pleasure.
If I could just remind everyone, as you chance across fascinating topics and speakers, please let me and Melissa know, and we'll hopefully put them into the program. But I just want you to think broadly in terms of the material that's of interest to all of us, because I think this is an example of a fascinating topic that none of us would have thought we'd have the opportunity to hear about or learn about. So thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you, everybody online. Pleasure.
I'm so glad you joined me. Very